Hi, I wanted to introduce us. My name is Deborah Boisvert, and I'm the Executive Director of BATEC, which is a National Science Foundation funded center, and I'll talk to you about that. And this is Ricardo Checchi, and he's an assistant professor in the MSIS area of UMass Boston. So just to give you a real quick overview, and then I'm going to run around the room because I was waiting to see if anybody else came in. This is kind of what we're going to do. We're going to talk a little bit about BATEC and transfer paths and some of the pathways, competing pathways, et cetera, and student pathways, the transfer constraints and enablers, a case study looking at some of the things that UMass Boston has done and some of the things that we're thinking of working through for the future. So before we start, I want to kind of get a sense of who's in the room. So if you can kind of just run quickly through, and then you can start and just kind of zoom up and down.
Hi, I'm Linda Foreman, and I'm from the College of Nevada. I teach sociology.
My name is Jordan. I'm from Chicago Public Schools, the Office of Pathways to College and Careers, and I'm with the Information Technology Cluster.
I'm Melissa Green. I'm from the College of San Mateo, and I teach Java and Internet programming.
I'm Marcia Vice, I'm from UMass Boston, and I teach computer science and ICT.
I'm Craig Persico. I'm here at City College of San Francisco, the chair of the Computer Science Department.
I'm Gary Hartley, Dean of Instruction and Technology at Folsom College.
I'm Deborah. I'm from University Community College, Manchester, and I teach computer technology.
I'm Louis Giambattista. I teach at Los Medanos College and City College of San Francisco, Computer Science Department.
Oh, okay.
So, and then down that road.
I'm Teresa Rowland. I'm with the Career Ladders Project. We work statewide in California with community colleges, and we're currently working on an AT&T funded research study that will talk about our findings to have a more inclusive and diverse ICT workforce. And we're looking at practices and sharing research. Probably be out this time next year.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Tala Kaderi. I'm the Dean of STEM at Roxbury Community College in Boston, Massachusetts.
Desmond Shun, Chabot College, Hayward, just across the bay, Computer Science and Business Administration.
Hi, I'm Patty Spadilla from Georgetown University, Fairfax, Virginia. I am in Applied Information Technology Department.
I'm Ethan. I'm the professor of accounting at Community College.
Okay. Thank you. That just gives us a little context of who we've got in the audience there. So BATEC stands for Broadening Advanced Technological Education Connections. That's why we say BATEC. It's much easier to do. It is a National Science Foundation funded National Center for Computing and Information Technologies. And so we focus in 4 regions in the country right this moment. We started in Boston as a regional center. We have now become a national center and are expanding our work into Chicago, San Francisco, and Las Vegas. So a lot of the colleges involved, and so part of what we do is really look at computing pathways. So we do the computational side of IT. So when they talk about the ICT part of it, we're doing the computational side of it. So, and that's really looking at the programming, the database, analytics, intelligence, all of that stuff as far as NSF is concerned. We look at a lot of the partnerships that are important to be able to build and grow these types of learning opportunities in these urban areas, Boston, as I said, San Francisco, Las Vegas, and Chicago. And the reason that we do that we chose these is that they have very significant industry needs in these areas. A lot of people think Las Vegas, really? And it's extremely important to understand that these are actually IT powerhouses. And so there's a lot of storage types of things that are going on in Nevada. There's a lot of analytics, of course, with the gambling industry there, and a lot of other things that thrive on a lot of the IT sectors that we're dealing with. We also do a lot of research, trying to figure out exactly what is happening. We're in the process of doing research right now on looking at middle skills in data. And so we're actually working with Monster to sit there and mine all sorts of different types of job seekers as well as resumes and job ads, etc. And then we also do a lot of work around the country trying to work on computational thinking and a lot of the pathways with the Department of Labor and things like that. So, so some of the things that we've been really trying to deal with in our region is looking at a lot of the misconceptions that you have with students as far as IT, or even their parents, or their peers, or even your faculty sometimes. You know, it's one of those things that a lot of people think that IT is only in China and India at this point, that, you know, there's no opportunity here in the U.S. And we still constantly have to dispel that with the students because they always hear about offshoring and outsourcing and all that type of stuff. And one of the things that's also interesting is that a lot of outsourcing is actually done within the United States, within the United States. So you may outsource something from Boston and be doing it in Colorado or something. It's not something that just because it's outsourced doesn't mean that it's offshore. So the other thing that was really interesting was when we first were funded back in the early 2000s, all of a sudden this kind of bubble that kind of burst, this dot-com bubble, so to speak. But all of our industry partners kept saying, you know, we need technical workers, we can't get the IT workers. What was happening is that IT actually became pervasive. And so it became a, you know, someone who was a financial manager that also had to understand database. And so it wasn't called a database administrator before per se, but they still had to have those skill sets. And so you saw some of this changing that that required us to think very differently about how we approached IT and computing. So the other thing is that computational thinking is kind of one of these foundational types of skills. And how do we really start thinking that and building the foundations that students need in order to successfully pursue some of these pathway areas. The other thing that we did within our work was trying to get rid of all of these silos within, not only across institutions, but within institutions. Because admissions wasn't talking with the departments, weren't talking with the transfer people, weren't talking with the advising people. And so we started really trying to get it so that students, and you know, university people didn't go to the community colleges and talk to them about it or work with high school students or anything like that. So we really tried to create an environment that allowed for much more collaborative activities. The other thing, if you had gone to an earlier session, we work very closely with industry partners, and they drive a lot of what we do and how we think about IT and how we think about getting our students prepared for the work that they're going to be able to do. So through all of this, we've really had to kind of think through how to deal with all of that. And so that's basically what we've dealt with. So if we talk about pathways, what happens is that a lot of times people think it's a very linear type of process. That you basically start here and you go here and you go here and you go here. You may kind of skip that possibly, but not necessarily, you know. And then you always start in your entry-level job. You then go up into this kind of, you get your raises and stuff, and you just kind of keep going up. Well, what's actually happened is that this is what these students are experiencing. There's all sorts of different paths that they're having to take, you know, from being laid off or companies merged or new skill sets that they had to learn. And not only do you go up, you actually sometimes have students who have a bachelor's degree going back into the community college to be able to get technical training or other types of skill sets. So you really don't have this nice seamless thing that is disconnected as you saw in the previous slide. So one of the things that has happened is that this makes it very difficult to really think about how do you connect students across all these levels. So that's one of the things that we want to address here in this session. So I'll turn it over.
You're still in charge. I'm typing.
Oh, that's right. He's typing. Okay. So I want you to start talking about, I want you to give us input on.
Get off the presentation.
You want to start with constraints first?
I don't think it'll.
Oh, you can't take it off?
Oh, yeah, go ahead and.
Okay.
Okay. And we'll put it back on. Okay, so can we talk a little bit about what let's start with the constraints first, because everybody has lots of those, I think. So what are some of the constraints at the community college that you deal with in trying to deal with transfer up to your 4-year? Yes?
So we have a problem quite often with, the borderline between upper and lower divisions. So, we weren't allowed to offer software engineering because they were insisting it was upper division, yet something we feel that should be offered as lower division. And,
Okay.
Some of the web programming classes, there's that borderline that we're always straddling.
So question whether it's at what level it should be taught.
Right.
Okay. Other constraints at the community college?
Number of units. Like everybody wants to inflate their class to 5 units versus 3 units.
Okay.
And then you get in a huge fight over that one, and that impacts some of the transfer stuff because you have this huge program that they want you to go through for an AAAS, and you just never get out of the place.
Others?
I think oftentimes we leave it to the students in community colleges to figure out the navigation point that a program of study is not clearly lined out, and they want to know, what do I get after a semester, after 2 semesters, and so it's a little bit of a jungle for them to navigate.
Okay. Let's go up to the receiving institution. So what do you think some of the constraints are with 4-year colleges that you're trying to transfer to?
What does this course that they're trying to transfer on me, what does this really mean in color?
Okay.
In times long past, for some institutions, I've actually had to send in my syllabus, the name of the book, the test answer to what I did, including some of the software programs that I do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we've got a lot of 4-year people. Talk about it. What are some of the constraints you have at the 4-year level?
The concept that they learn in community college courses, by the time they transfer over, they have forgotten most of the concepts. Look at the find out. Also inconsistency, even when community colleges claim that they have taught their students those concepts, and students transfer over, they say, we never saw those concepts. So inconsistency.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about accreditation. Many of your 4-year institutions have to deal with accreditation pieces. What do you think are some of the constraining issues that you have with some of that accreditation piece? Yes?
Well, I'm not very familiar with this, but I heard a comment along the lines from San Francisco State that said computer science there. Because I was asking, from my perspective with computer science, I don't know why these students do 2 semesters of physics, for example.
Yeah.
But he was saying the accreditation kind of demands it. I don't understand that.
Or it could even be kind of the regulatory piece on the next one. So, for example, some of the Bachelor of Science programs, to be able to qualify for Bachelor of Science, it has to have 2 lab sciences or something like that. So it may be either in the accreditation or the regulatory types of pieces that those tend to be in. Okay, so let's talk about some of the enablers. What can you do at the community college to enable transfer?
Student orientation.
Okay, student orientation.
Some of our schools don't have that in place, and universities usually do. So our students are really thrown out there without, often their first generation, they don't know what to jump to.
Mm-hmm.
So, orientation.
What's another enabler?
Contacts at the institution you're trying to transfer to.
So contact points. Okay.
We have exactly 17 counselors. Students are not required to have a counselor, so therefore they're thrown to the wolves, have to navigate this morass without any guidance.
Okay.
Point blank, I tell my students, before you go talk to those guys in that building, you go contact somebody on the university or the institution you're transferring to, talk to them, show them our stuff, ask them what they would take. Then after that one, you take our stuff that they're going to take, abandon ship, go. And of course that gets me in really deep with the rest of my faculty. But then again, I got 10-year-old senior man, so you know, it makes something out of it. I tell my students, I said, you're trying to transfer. This is your objective. What are they going to take? And they show them I'll even give you my syllabus and some of this stuff, and then you show them to their department they're going to. If they will take that one, take the courses, abandon ship, because a lot of our classes will not transfer to the UCs or the CSUs.
Okay.
What's under accreditation? Really able to have better transferability between the curriculums aligned more appropriately.
And I'll talk a little bit about some of the efforts that have been going on in IT around that. Okay. So other types of things that would be enablers at either the community college or the four-year level.
At four-year level, I would hesitate to communicate directly with students from community college.
I'm sorry?
I would hesitate at a four-year university. I would hesitate to communicate directly with students of community college, but I would love to communicate with faculty of community college.
So faculty contact.
Faculty contact is much preferred.
And I would love to collaborate. You know, having some kind of a collaboration between the two that there's some assistance.
Okay.
So basically having yearly annual meetings with community college and university.
Okay. So when you think about success, when you think about transfer, what would you consider a successful outcome of transfer? Tell me what you think.
The student gets accepted.
Gets accepted.
Gets accepted.
At a four-year institution.
At a four-year institution, transfer to.
Okay.
And after that one, I consider I've landed you. I'm ex-military. I've landed you on the beach. I did my job. Now it's up for you to get off the beach and get up and advance.
Okay. So.
And all the courses and all the credits.
Okay. So the courses and credits count. Okay. So that's a successful outcome.
We actually have no feedback. Once they leave our hall, we have no feedback over where they go, what happened to them. Anybody that comes back from and tells me that they transferred from Chabot to someplace else, I immediately grab them aside, buy them lunch, and says, "Now I'm going to debrief you of everything that's happened." Because I have to know exactly what I can prepare the next group to go up against.
Okay, so
I
feedback.
have no feedback at all.
So a feedback loop would be important. Okay. Any other success? Yes.
I think primarily the one I know from our school is that if the student comes to our school, starts the program, and then transfers, the state doesn't see that as being successful. And I think that's a bad thing. That is a success for us as a community college that we were able to get them to transfer to a four-year institution.
Okay.
And so, you know, it's like completion rates and graduation rates and all of that transferring for us.
So, it's been great. So I want to, the reason why we did this was to kind of give you a little bit of context for the discussion coming in with a case study. So what was really exciting, going to the next one. So what was very exciting in BATEC was that in fact UMass Boston did not have an IT degree. The community colleges did. And so we had the luxury of, in some ways, building that IT degree. However, as much as you think that's a luxury, it also was one of those where we were not able to really think about proactively think about what was going to actually happen in there. So this is kind of a case study of how you really can look at transfer and how that happened, even when we thought we were intelligently developing this from the start. So so I will give you that caveat, because it wasn't something that all of a sudden we had divergent programs and we were trying to bring them together. We actually were thoughtfully trying to do this. So I'm turning it over to Ricardo.
Before I show you that whole mess, I heard you. I got it into UMass 4 years ago. They said, okay, you're in charge of the BSIT. We need students, we need transfers. make this happen. Good God. I mean, I try to fix all these problems. And it's true, everything I heard, I lived it from the other side. This is what the program is. When we started, it was less. But basically, this is just the IT part. So now we start and we say, first thing was, okay, let's figure out what the program is about. And you were saying, okay, let's give them some advice on to not throw it in the water and let them figure out. Okay. I didn't know what this was. I have to do that, and I promise you half of our faculty doesn't have a good, clear picture of how our program works. So basically what we have is first and 2-year courses, 3- and 4-year courses. By rule, one of the regulations, we are not taking anything on this level whatsoever, except these two. Forget about these 3. They shouldn't be there, but it's the only way it works. So I start with this. I say, okay, I think I got it. Now let's pick one community college, which is the biggest community college with the most students, that sends us the most students, Bunker Hill. Let's start there. How many students? 700. Okay. Let's start. How many students can we get? Or of all these programs, how many students can we have? Well, they have this one program where they have 50. Start with that. So of all the things I can do, I cannot make an agreement that is a blanket agreement for all their programs. I have to do it for one specific program, which was, by the way, one of the things Deborah didn't say, they have one program specifically designed to transfer. So community colleges normally say, okay, in the pathways, let's prepare students for their first job. This is not that. This is, let's prepare students to go into the college.
And actually, can I just do one real quick thing? So what you have is the 4 that you see around there, and you have 4 concentrations. That's why you have 4 boxes there, because those are concentrations for students. I don't think you actually.
Yeah, no, I didn't say that. These and these they have to take, and they have to choose one of these boxes.
Yes.
They don't take everything. Sorry about that. Yeah. So I say, okay, let's start mapping, and we came up with this. But like you were said, when I start doing this, I have to sit down with their catalog, this course description, with a file of their syllabi. I do look into which books they teach, because the book is the one thing that tells you the most about a course. More than anything, the book tells you most about a course. You look at the assignments, you look at the work they do. And we have to do this for every single course. So when we talk about what are the constraints, that's the #1 constraint. Okay, because while I have this trying to say, okay, let's get this done, on this side, I have my boss telling me, but don't forget about your research. And what I did is, oh, don't forget about your research. So that's the biggest constraint here, is it's a lot of work to do this, course by course, for this one specific program of their 700 students, only 50. And then if I want to go to the next college, I have to do the whole thing again. And the advantage here is, again, points of contacts are incredibly important because I need the materials. So this is how it starts. And I could do this with one college. I have to do it with the rest of the state. So as I'm doing it, okay, I'm saying, okay, many courses, most courses, much fine. Programming, well, programming is programming, okay, we do fine. Networking is pretty much the same, we're doing fine. They have a course program solving in IT, we have a course program solving in IT, but that's because they created the course. Actually, BATEC created the course and we say, oh, that's a cool course, let's use it. It's part of how the program co-evolved and was born out of that. So we have that course, Statistics, okay, it's the same statistics. Then we look at some other courses and we say, okay, databases. And I look at databases, and at a four-year college, at a four-year university, what I'm looking is the conceptual side of statistics. The one thing I'm going to be looking first, before than anything, I'm going to be looking at where's normalization. I don't look at anything else. Before I look at databases, before I accept databases, I look, okay, where's normalization here? What I'm finding out is normalization is in the third level course. They have an introduction to database, they have an SQL, then they talk about design and normalization. And I say, wait, that's the first thing we teach. How do we do this? Because we are teaching the more conceptual side of IT, and that's a problem. And then there's HTML, and it's the same thing. I look at their HTML courses, community colleges, Bunker Hill in particular, I don't want to generalize, starts with Dreamweaver and the graphic design. We go straight into HTML, HTTP, all the hard coding stuff, not the application level. So what do I do? In this one case, it was the first one. We needed to make it happen, and I have a great relationship through Deborah with the college. We say, okay, let's give an allowance. They are actually adjusting their courses to include some of these topics earlier in the program. So for the moment, we're going to take it as it is. And they are. They are redesigning these courses to make it much better. But we made allowances. We are taking these courses even though we are not completely comfortable. And one of the things we did now is when we started with 2 tracks, those 2 boxes. Now we added 2 more, one of which is business intelligence. And in business intelligence, being so flexible with databases is not as good because it's more database oriented. So we are rethinking right now. Fortunately, I have a good relationship that we are working together rather than throwing everything out. We're working together, but these mismatches are a problem, are an issue. Syllabi are important. That's another thing. Before I forget, one of the things when you say your students, tell your students to keep their syllabi. Keep the copies. If they want to transfer, they want to come to the school, they throw them out. And when we are in doubt, the first thing I'm going to ask is, okay, where's your syllabi? What? Tell them to keep them. Even if they are not thinking of going to a 4-year college. And then there was Linux Windows. And with Linux Windows, we have 2 issues here. One is some community colleges, and Bunker Hill was one. Bunker Hill gives them the option. You can do Windows or you can do Linux. Now, we do Linux first, Windows after. So if they do Windows at the community college, then it's a problem. Okay, because in our Linux course, they learn the conceptual stuff and the basics, and then it's very hard once you learn it, once you design it in a particular order to reverse it. The other side is, which fortunately is not the case with Bunker Hill, is some community colleges focus more on the client version of operating administration, and others focus on the server side. We could not care less about the client side of operating systems, because that's a more technical side. That's not what a 4th year do. We don't use it. The server side, we use it to build applications on top of it. We use to set up the infrastructure. The client side is not something we really do as part of our program. I mean, it's something I do for fun. We don't really prepare our students to be to do that. Although I imagine that they teach that kind of stuff. So that is the problem that we have. In some community colleges, I'm seeing that some courses are, and this is one problem I saw with one transfer student. I saw they said, but I did operating systems. Okay, show me what you have, and it was all client oriented. And it's and it's a problem. So these are some of the decisions. Another big problem is we are thinking, let's make the credits transfer. Let's make the courses transfer. Even if everything transfers, the program of study is so tight in the other 2 years that it has to be very well planned at the community college for them to be able to graduate in 2 years. Because the things that are left to learn at the university are so many that it's very hard to put into 2 years. So this is a packed schedule for a 2-year transfer, and this is an ideal case. The margin of error is so small that it's really a problem, and that's another thing for students. It's not only let's make all the courses transfer. It's okay. Let's make not only when you think about transfer, don't look at your program. Try to learn what the 4-year university program requires, and as they are studying in the community college, fulfill those requirements. If they have electives, my friend, this is the most, in a sense, ironic advice that I give to community college students who are thinking of transferring. Whichever electives are left in the community college degree, do not take IT courses. If you're doing an IT program, don't take IT electives. Why? Because chances are they will not, other than your core, they will not fulfill any requirements on the college. Take courses that fulfill general elective requirements, general education requirements on the other side. If you have electives and you're thinking of transferring, look at what their English, what their social, what the humanities requirements, and take those. Take the ones that transfer well. And those are usually somewhat well known and documented, at least in our case. So that's what I'm telling you. Don't go for that. Don't go for IT. More IT. More IT. No, there's such a thing as too much IT. If you're thinking about transferring. Articulation agreements help a lot. This articulation agreement to us helped us a lot. Why? Because some of the problems you're saying, who's your contact person in the university? Who do you talk? What are your weapons? The articulation agreement tells the university admissions people what to take, what to accept, that they don't have a choice. It's documented. Their boss is usually one of the signatures on the agreement. So when they say, okay, I don't know what to do, okay, here, this is what you do. If they took the courses that are on the agreement, there's no argument there. It's quite clear-cut. So it offers a clear path. It guarantees acceptance of credit. If it's not on the articulation agreement, here, get a coin. Let me get your coin. And it's going to be up to whoever faculty that course, whoever faculty says that request fell into. They are limited. In this case, I got one agreement for less than 10% of one community college's IT student population. Extending that to the rest of the population, it's very hard for me to do that now. We are extending it. We have to go college by college, program by program, course by course. And I start with looking at, okay, does your college offer a transfer-oriented program that matches somewhat what we have? Yes, that's what we start. And we'll see where we can go from there. The challenges overall. And we just discussed many of these we talked about. I just talked about courses that match, some courses don't really match. Easy for transfer-oriented programs, harder for career programs. Concepts, certain concepts are important. We look at, like I said, when I look at databases, I'm going to look at where is your normalization? When I look at HTML, I'm not going to look at, do you focus more on Dreamweaver or do you focus more on the technical and the underlying structure? When I look at, those are pretty much the ones I have the most trouble with. Because networks and programming, those are pretty standard. When I look at programming, we look at the object-oriented advanced concept. We look at, did you cover interfaces? Do you cover inheritance, polymorphism? We require 2 courses in programming. That's the end game. So that's where we are going to look at. Did you get that far? We don't usually take application-oriented courses, and by application I don't mean applied courses. I mean courses that focus on teaching how to use an application. If the description of your database course says, we'll teach you databases using Access, we don't like it. If the book is how to learn databases with Access, we don't like it. Courses that say, okay, there's 3 credits on learning Office, Microsoft Office. Well, we require them to learn Microsoft Office, or our normal students, but we don't give them credit for. So giving credit for the one that comes from the community college sounds somewhat unfair. So if the focus is teaching them how to use a program, it's in general, there's no conceptual basis, which is what we're looking for. Those are a problem. Sequencing is an issue, and I'm not even going into the sequencing rule that we have, but Linux first, Windows first is part of the problem. The introductory courses are an issue, and this is more of us. I don't know that this is a generic issue. For us, we have a course to introduction in IT, a course for introduction in IS, and a course for introduction in computer science. Those are 3 different courses, and they have different roles and they fulfill different requirements of the program, so it's not the same, and they are usually a problem, particularly because community colleges seem to give students an option regarding of whether they come from a more business-oriented or more computer science-oriented background. Not a big deal.
Okay. So one of the things that plays into this is that if you look at the Association for Computing Machinery, which is the accrediting body, they actually created what they call a computing curricula. And if you look at the 5 disciplines, and I like this chart because it kind of gives you a little bit of a sense of where some of the things fall. To the left of the chart is far more theoretical. The right-hand chart part of it is much more applied types of things. Here it's much more hardware, infrastructure type of thing. The top tends to be much more organizationally balanced. So if you kind of look where the coursework comes in each of these, it gives you a sense of why there are some of these differences in the way that people have to look at the types of courses. Because if you look at the IT, it's very applied. You look at CS, it's much more theoretical. If you look at computer engineering, it's much more infrastructure hardware based. If you look at information systems, it's much more organizationally based. And so if you really look at this, except in software engineering, which kind of gets a little bit of all of the different pieces, there's not a lot of overlap between a lot of those different disciplines. And so you will have some of the overlap in the very beginning, which is part of that very introductory core. But this leads to also some of the issues that you have around trying transferability around different programs. So if we go to the next slide. So one of the things that that Association for Computing Machinery did is looked at a accreditation for IT. This is actually a new discipline. There used to be 4 disciplines, then they added IT because it wasn't really addressed in all of the others. A body of knowledge was released in December 2009, I think is what it is. or 2008. Yeah, 2008, December 2008. And so that represented the body of knowledge and curriculum guidelines for information technology programs at the 4-year level. Now, I was part of the special interest group for IT education, and so one of the things I said was, while you're doing this 4-year piece, we really have to start thinking about the 2-year piece. So we pulled together a group of 32 people, and from 4-year as well as 2-year. And we actually looked at what are the types of things that are offered in the first 2 years of an IT degree. So at the community college as well as the first 2 years in a 4-year program. And we actually looked at what those things are like. There's a document that actually talks about what that committee had done. So if you look at that, it's one of those where you see a difference here of 212 kind of contact hours versus 314 contact hours in the 4-year program. Now, a lot of the 314 is added onto because of concentrations and stuff like that. So, but the thing that's really interesting about that is that it kind of helps people think a little bit more targeted in exactly what those commonalities are. So now Ricardo is going to take it away and talk about how that gets thought about.
This is another of the problems we have. Roughly speaking, if you see on the 4-year column, it's all around 25, 30 hours. So we say, okay, that's pretty much each of those lines is one course. The one that is 38, that's 2 courses in programming. But if I have one course here, let's say information management, if I have 34 hours and you put 25, that difference is not really justifying a course, or the other way around. What you teach, sometimes it will lack some things that we put in our one database course. So if our database course is 34 hours and yours is 25, or the community college is 25, it's okay, what happened to the other 10, and how do we take one course instead of for the other? And that's part of the reasons. The other part of the reason is, the other thing is, in our case, our program came just before this came up. Deborah says we were privy to some of this data. We were involved in this project, but we don't match that exactly. And if community colleges do, that's a problem. I was talking to Chuck from Purdue, and he was saying, well, they actually match their program. They match these. Community colleges match these. So when they both are aligned to the ACM, it's easier. If they are not really aligned, it's not all that easy. And that's part of the problem that we have, is that since we came slightly before this, it's very, there are some mismatches that we have.
And I think the other piece with that is a lot of, as Ricardo referred to as career programs, they'll choose some of those things. It's not all of these. So they'll focus heavily on database, but won't do, say, any networking or some of the other types of pieces. So it's one of those that this was really looking at what an IT professional needs to know and be able to do. And so it's one of those that if you only take out pieces of that, it makes it even more difficult to be able to align it.
Okay, and now I'm going to do what I do to my students, that when I'm about to run out of time, I speed up and they get all riled up, so I apologize for that. Some of the things we already talked about, challenges. It's a running process. I didn't know how to learn. I have to learn about the community college programs. I have to understand the structure of the community college before I can say, okay, it matches up. But I also have to learn about mine. And a lot of the people involved is not fully aware of these intricacies. Accessing information, points of contact are important. Description of the catalog, description of courses, the syllabi are a huge part of the tools we use to do this. Resource constraints, I think that faculty time and dedication is probably the most critical one. It is a lot of work. And for universities, you have to actually budget that time, and it's not necessarily properly budgeted. Accreditation is important. We have to be careful. We have to comply with, if we are AACSB accredited, so we have to, whenever we sign an articulation agreement, whenever we accept students, we have to abide by the accreditation standards. So we have to be very careful on how we do that. Internal regulations is a big nightmare for me. For one, things that if we want to change and say, okay, because our curriculum came up, our program came up before the ACM's curriculum, let's change it to match the ACM. That's a big nightmare, and it's pretty much impossible. It's a systemic change of such magnitude that I'm not even going to try, because I have to burn so many bridges. I have to deal with the registrar. I have to deal with graduation requirements. It's very hard to, even for students that start with us, it's hard. So for students that are transferring, it's even harder. We already talked, I just talked a little bit about AACSB. We have to take care of students. We have a prescribed curriculum, so we have to stay within those boundaries. So there's so much we can take, even if we wanted. We have to dedicate faculty. Faculty is both a constraint and an enabler. And that's pretty much, there's some restrictions. And this is what needs to be done. Course by course, first step is set up a matrix. Community college by community college, program by program, course by course, syllabi by syllabi, or syllabus by syllabus. Set up the matrix, one community college at a time. Yes, I'm almost done. That's close to the end. It's very labor intensive, this process. So I'm trying to extend the scope. I'm trying to extend the scope to other community colleges. I'm trying to extend the scope to the career programs. For the career programs in particular, I had to change some of our internal requirements, because this thing about taking too much IT courses is really a problem. So I have to make changes or foster changes in a way that, so that we can take all these extra IT programs. Recommendation for students: it's important. Giving them good advice is very important. Having contact people on both sides, on the faculty and on the administrative side, is important. I don't know how to help you with that one. Being aware when they go into a college, like I said, there's very little room for error. So being aware not only of the curriculum but also of the prerequisites and the sequencing. Because if they do one of those boxes, it takes 2 years in itself, minimum. Once they get, so they have to get started right away, the right way, or they have to choose a different path. So these would be my recommendations for students who want to transfer. There is The original version of the CW and the original proposal, they are posted.
But we can share those.
But I can share, yes.
Yeah, we can.
Now, I think it's live for a course, but if you're having multiple students in that course, are you looking at every single faculty member?
Bingo.
Or are you just looking at one?
We're kind of, yeah.
Okay, we can continue that conversation offline.